Welcome! A couple of months ago I posted a video on YouTube claiming that the grand solar minimum had been cancelled. Strangely, that video disappeared from YouTube. Don't know why, no explanation. So I made a new one and I'll post it again. Let's take a look at some of the things claimed about the grand solar minimum. One very famous proponent of this claimed that solar maximum for solar cycle 25 would be in February of 2022. It claimed that sunspot numbers would be declining from solar cycle 24 to solar cycle 25. There'd be fewer, smaller flares and CMEs. There would be decaying solar magnetic fields which would let more cosmic rays in, forming more clouds. And that would cause the Earth to cool. The thing about all of these points is none of them are true. Well, let's take a look at these points one by one. ZHARKOVA, in her famous 2015 paper, in figure 2, predicted when the next solar maximum would be for solar cycle 25. You can see it here in the plot below. That's where she said solar cycle 25 maximum would be. If you compare that blue arrow with the green arrow, you can work out how many months after 2020 that would be. And it works out to be 26 months. So that would be this February of 2022. At the beginning of 2023, we should be about here on our plot and be halfway down from solar maximum towards solar minimum. The only problem is that that star indicates where the sunspot number is at the moment. And as you can see, it's at least a factor of 2 higher than what she was predicting. Her prediction would say that we should be at solar minimum by this time next year. Either be no sunspots around. That is very unlikely, and I expect even by then we will not have reached the true solar maximum. So this is not true either. Another prediction by Kitsaveli, which is I think a bit more reasonable than the previous one, was given in 2020, and she showed these plots here, which predicted that the solar cycle 25 would be about half the level of solar cycle 24. Now that has not proved true either. You can see again where we are currently with the sunspot number. It's way up there. And so again, it looks as though her prediction is not going to pan out. So that one is wrong as well. NASA and NOAA made a prediction jointly, amazingly enough. They put together a panel, and the panel predicted the red curve that's shown on here, which would say that solar cycle 25 was slightly larger than solar cycle 24. The black diamonds on here are the actual data to date, and in fact by the end of this month there'll be a new diamond on there which will be considerably higher, nearly up at the 150 level. So again, the experts are underestimating the curve. Now their model still could work out if we have a drop off in solar activity in the next few months, so I'm going to have to put that as a question mark, but it doesn't look very good for their prediction at the moment. Let's take a look at some of the main activity indicators and see how they're doing. Comparing solar cycle 24 in all of these plots is going to be in blue, and solar cycle 25 is in an orangey red. If you look at C flares, you can see that we've had over 3,000 C flares since solar minimum. Compared with the same stage of solar cycle 24, it was less than half of that level. M flares, which are the much more important flares, about the same sort of story. And you will notice that both the C flares and M flares in solar cycle 24 are beginning to flatten out by this stage, whereas in solar cycle 25, if anything, they're accelerating. Now we have X flares. Solar cycle 25 is outperforming solar cycle 24, but the numbers are small and you can't put too much reliance on the difference there. We also track the number of coronal mass ejections. For solar cycle 24, we had just over 2,000 by this time. With solar cycle 25, we're more like 27. Nevertheless, the difference is significant, and solar cycle 25 is distinctly and significantly outperforming solar cycle 24. Also, NOAA tracks the number of major sunspot regions and numbers them. You can get a rate of emergence of these major regions as a function of time from looking at the NOAA data. By this stage of the solar cycle 24, we had just over 400 major regions. By this stage in solar cycle 25, we nearly have 450 regions. So again, there's a significant difference between the two, although the difference is not very great. So that's a no as well. There was also a claim that the solar magnetic field is weakening. Well, we can take a look at that by checking out the magnetograms of the sun. So here back in 2020, you can see the sun has scattered very weak fields and just one tiny spot region which would represent very strong fields. In 2021, the background field is a little bit stronger. You can see it. There's more bipoles and things of that sort. And we do have a couple of more substantial regions on the sun. By the beginning of 2022, the situation is very different. You have lots of large regions on the sun and the background field is very strong. And now it's even more extreme. We have large numbers of very strong fields in both hemispheres and a pretty substantial background field as well. So therefore, I would argue that this shows no evidence that the sun's magnetic field is weakening. In fact, the reverse. It seems to be strengthening very rapidly. So that's a no as well. So how can we check the large scale field? This is the large scale weak field. Well, this comes from the polar regions mainly. And so we can take a look at that using a coronagraph. Here's a coronographic image of the sun taken in 2020. And you can see that most of the magnetic fields are restricted to the equatorial belt. Very linear structure, and almost nothing in either the northern or southern hemisphere. In 2021, that equatorial field is spread out a little bit, and you've got a few more features. In 2022, certainly there's a lot more at higher latitudes in both hemispheres. And if you look now, it's quite spectacular. We have coronal streamers at all different angles from the sun, and there's only just relatively weak areas of magnetic field near the polar regions. So the large scale field is also strengthening along with the solar cycle, which is what would be expected. So once again, their idea that the magnetic field of the sun is weakening is wrong. There is another idea that because the sun's magnetic field is weakening, the number of cosmic rays are not decreasing. In fact, they are increasing. And here is a plot of cosmic rays over the last 6 years or so. As you can see there, we're increasing all the way up until 2020, and then suddenly started to drop off as solar cycle 25 started to take off. In fact, the number of cosmic rays has dropped by 15% since the beginning of this cycle. So this is following the usual pattern of cosmic rays, and that they aren't inundating the Earth, they're falling as would be expected. So therefore, this argument too is a no. The last argument they make is that the Earth is cooling as a result of all of this. Well, it certainly isn't. Here is a plot of the global temperature anomaly over the last 2 solar cycles. And if anything, there's an upward trend. And in fact, if you fit a line to this data, you can see it's a plus 0.27 degrees centigrade per decade. That's very fast. And so none of these effects are proving to be real. So this one is a no as well. The Earth is in fact still continuing to warm. What should we expect when there is a grand solar minimum? Well, the only grand solar minimum that's been properly observed is the Maunder minimum, and even that has got rather sketchy data. But you can see here, that's where our sunspot number is currently, and that's what a grand solar minimum looked like. Now, the highest flux in that grand solar minimum is about 20 to 30, and we're already at 140 or 150. So this is not anything like what a grand solar minimum should look like or does look like. Trying to label this as part of a grand solar minimum is just plain nonsense. So let's conclude. There's no grand solar minimum during this solar cycle. None of their predictions have come true so far. Their models have failed. There is no indication of a grand solar minimum in any of the solar activity parameters, and it just shows that what they're doing is bad science. And why are they doing bad science? Because they can make money off of it. So if you've been taken in by the grand solar minimum hype, just ignore it in future. Don't send them any more money. I will keep you informed of what's really going on with the sun over the coming years as we go towards maximum. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.